Okay, let's get started. So hello again to everyone on the call and welcome to the May 2014 edition of the VolunteerMatch Solutions Best Practice Network webinar series, Virtual Volunteering, an Untapped Resource for Employee Engagement. My name is Lauren Wagner and I'm the Senior Manager of Engagement here at VolunteerMatch, and I'm going to be helping to facilitate things this morning. So before we get started, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. There are a few ways that you can ask questions to our presenters throughout this morning's session. BM_solutions using the hashtag BMVPN. So we're going to be compiling all of your questions throughout the morning, and then we'll hold some time at the end to pose your questions to the presenters. So make sure you keep them coming in as you're thinking of them throughout the session. Also, just so everybody on the call knows, a copy of the slides as well as a link to the recorded webinar will be sent out after the live session, so you will get all of this information as follow-up. So this morning we're going to be joined by two virtual volunteering experts. First we have Jayne Cravens, who is the founder of Kaye Communications and a leading expert and consultant on the topic of virtual volunteering. And we'll also be joined by Kaye Morgan-Curtis, who is the Manager of Global Inclusion and Philanthropy at Newell Rubbermaid. And she's going to be giving us the practitioner perspective from her experience with implementing a virtual volunteering component into the employee volunteering programs at Newell Rubbermaid. So when we were first kind of brainstorming for this session and thinking about, what we really wanted to focus on, we realized that while virtual volunteering has definitely been around for quite some time, which you'll hear more about in a little bit, we realized that many companies haven't really been talking about it or utilizing it as a strategy to engage more of their employees in their volunteering programs. So we thought a good way to kind of start moving that conversation forward would be to jump right into some of the myths that many individuals and companies might hold around the use of virtual volunteering. So that's what we're going to do this morning. We'll be moving through the top 5 myths and hearing both from Jayne and Kaye on why these don't necessarily hold true in the corporate setting. You're going to walk away from this morning's session, I hope, with a better understanding of what virtual volunteering is in general, and also how and why it can really be a great strategy for engagement through some of these examples from Newell Rubbermaid's experience. But first, we wanted to gauge the feeling in the room about virtual volunteering. So I'm going to be launching a poll here in just a second. Let me get that poll pulled up. But the question that we're going to be asking you is, how do you feel about virtual volunteering? So if everyone, once I launch this poll here, can go ahead and just select your answer. Are you excited about it? Sounds great. I can't wait. I'm not really sure, or I'm skeptical, maybe even a little scared. So we'll go ahead and give people a few more minutes to answer, and then we'll share the responses with everyone. All right. Great. So it looks like, I believe I should, share, here we go. Sorry guys, never done polls before. All right, so it's interesting. It looks like actually most of the people on the call, well, most people on the call are either excited or not really sure, and only a few that aren't quite so sure, maybe even a little skeptical about it. So we're gonna ask you again at the end, so we hope that we can kind of flip some of you I'm not sures or skepticals into the sounds great and I can't wait. So with that said, we'll go ahead and jump right into things. Jayne, are you on the call?
Yes, I am. I hope everyone can hear me okay.
You sound great.
Terrific. So that's me. Just like to put up some pictures so you know who's talking to you. And also, just so you know, myself and Susan Ellis just published a book, The Last Virtual Volunteering Guidebook, which came out in January. I'm all over the internet and would love for you to follow me and interact with me online. So the next slide. So what is virtual volunteering? It's very simple. It's a person who is doing work for a nonprofit or maybe a government agency, a school, and they're not paid. And they're doing that work in some way via a home, school, telecenter computer, work computer, or any other internet-connected device like a smartphone. It has lots of other names: digital volunteering, micro volunteering, and it can take just a few minutes, or it can be a one-time commitment. It can be an ongoing commitment. It can last for years. And the next slide. There are lots of tasks. This isn't even a comprehensive list of tasks, but these are some of the things that people do as online volunteers: translating documents, editing proposals, providing legal advice, counseling people, editing a video, managing other online volunteers. I mean, the tasks are just endless, just as they are for telecommuting tasks, if you think about it. Next slide. And I want to really emphasize that there's a range of assignments in terms of how long they take. It can be board membership. It could be a marketing manager who takes on a role for a year. It can be groups of volunteers helping with an assignment online, such as building a wiki or making sure a website is accessible. It can be very short term. For instance, somebody just going on to a nonprofit's website and seeing if it's accessible, or creating a social media plan that someone else executes, editing a document. And the assignments can be very high responsibility and require highly skilled, a lot of skills like editing a video, or they can be online. Well, actually they are online. That's what we're talking about, is online volunteering. So next slide. And I'll switch it over to Kaye.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me?
Yep, you sound good.
Excellent. Before I go into our employee volunteering, I just wanted to give a brief oversight of Newell Rubbermaid, who we are and what we do. We are a consumer products company headquartered here in Atlanta, Georgia. We have approximately over 19,000 employees worldwide in regions including Asia Pacific, Latin America, Europe, Middle East, Africa, the U.S., and Canada. And we have sales, of course, in over 100 companies. Next slide, please. You may know us better for our brands. As you look over the brand sheet, this is usually when people say ooh and ah. Our brands are separated in segments, including writing and creative expressions, home solutions, tools, baby and parenting, and commercial products. Next, please. Who are our people? We have about 7,300 factory or non-union employees, roughly about 6,300 professional in sales, 2,400 factory union employees, and 2,100 clerical employees. Our challenges with such a diverse global employee base typically include making volunteerism inclusive for salaried versus hourly employees. We have the issue of office versus manufacturing employees. Our challenge is time off the line and union requirements and restrictions. We also have issues with engaging those who are not in a traditional office or plant. For example, our telecommuters, our sales team typically are out in the field and not at a traditional office setting. We also have a challenge with engaging our employees and senior leaders who can't get away during the day. Their schedules or travel schedules are so packed that they don't really have the time to focus on volunteering in the traditional work time frame. So we've looked at on-site volunteering and lunchtime volunteering for those solutions, but we've also looked at virtual volunteering. Next, please. Give, Serve, Grow is Newell Rubbermaid's employee giving program, and this is where employees can support causes important to them and the company through volunteerism and donations. We have our employees participate in company-sponsored events like our Global Day of Service and Week of Caring, but we also have a volunteer time-off policy that allows full-time employees 8 paid hours during the calendar year to volunteer with organizations and for causes that matter the most to them as well. Next, please. Our Give, Serve, Grow teams use our VolunteerMatch site to drive local engagement in the countries and cities where they are. We provide our employees with tools and resources that make it easier for them to find opportunities where they can volunteer as a team or individually. And in addition to our volunteer management system, We provide toolkits and recorded presentations on planning a volunteer project, on planning a donation drive, and organizing a Give, Serve, Grow team in their local market. Next.
Great. Thank you so much, Kaye, for the introduction, and Jayne also for the introduction into virtual volunteering. So why don't we go ahead and jump into the first myth that virtual volunteering is a very new concept. So Jayne, why don't you get us started with that one?
Sure. Well, I'm sure for some of you it is a new idea, but it's actually a practice that's more than 30 years old. It's as old as the Internet. There are thousands of organizations engaging online volunteers, and there are many thousands, maybe millions of online volunteers out there engaged in service. And I actually just did a research paper for the EU to show them how many thousands of online volunteers there already are just in Europe. So it's a very established practice and has some really great best practices around it. So next slide.
Great. So quickly, Kaye, I wanted to know, I know that you just did recently a presentation on virtual volunteering at a conference, and from kind of where you sit in being a practitioner in employee volunteering, where have you seen virtual volunteering either coming up or not coming up in the kind of the corporate sector?
It is coming up. I've found it's certainly a new concept here at Newell Rubbermaid from the perspective of being able to engage our employees or giving them another option to be engaged. I mentioned earlier that we do have a variety of employees here, so we have to constantly look for ways to engage all employees at every level. I think it is something that so far we've seen great results. But we are certainly in the infancy stage with it, and I think that's true for many organizations as well.
Great, thanks. Great, so let's jump into myth number 2. Virtual volunteering is great for people who otherwise don't have time to volunteer.
So it takes real time to volunteer, whether you're doing it online or on-site. And that said, virtual volunteering is very convenient, as you heard from Kaye, for somebody who's on the road and is just not going to be able to stop by their local organization and volunteer in the traditional sense. They might be able to do it online to help at their local school or to help with the local organization they care about. That said, it still takes real time. So if an assignment says it's going to take 30 minutes or it's going to take an hour, it really is going to take 30 minutes or an hour. So why that's important is because some people decide they want to try this and then think that they're going to have extra time that will magically materialize for them to make their commitment. And what happens is then they don't make their commitment. So what's important to emphasize at your company is that virtual volunteering is very convenient indeed, but it really does take real time. It's a real commitment. And
right.
I guess
that's a great point to make, and I think that kind of another great takeaway from this concept is, finding the project that's right for you. So finding one that fits what time availability you have, or that your employees have, in order to make sure that it's going to be a successful experience for both. So Kaye, tell us about virtual volunteering at Newell Rubbermaid. Kaye, are you on the call?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, now we can.
Okay, thanks. The 2011 Deloitte Volunteer Impact Survey said that 71% of employees say they don't participate in corporate volunteering because they're squeezed for time. In the example that we have here, you'll see highlighted in the black that this particular virtual volunteer project takes 10 minutes a week from your computer. We found that using VolunteerMatch, we've been able to identify at least 4,200 different opportunities for our employees to engage. Next slide, please. So who for us uses virtual volunteering? I spoke earlier again about the line workers. So we have our manufacturing and our warehousing employees who cannot, again, remove themselves from the manufacturing line during the day. So they have the opportunity during their lunch breaks, before or after work, and on their own time to use virtual volunteering to participate. We've also found the same to be true for our call center employees, again, who cannot leave their desks and their phone sets, but they have the opportunity to volunteer and still be a part of something on their own time or during their lunch breaks. We find it is a great tool for our expatriate employees who are traveling from country to country or living in country to country. If there is a particular organization that they favor in their home country, virtual volunteering allows them to be able to continue to volunteer with that country, with that organization, regardless of where they are in the world. Finally, our executives also find it as a great way to be involved. They don't always have the time to leave their offices to go out and do physical hands-on volunteering, but they have their opportunity to use their skill set, whether it be reviewing resumes or coming up with strategic plans. There's a variety of virtual volunteer opportunities for any level of employee out there with any level with different commitments of time. Next.
Great, yeah, and I think that another kind of takeaway from what Kaye was just talking about, kind of this concept of the fact that virtual volunteering is flexible on when it's done. So, you know, when we're talking about engagement, that flexibility of, you know, the person doesn't actually have to physically go to a volunteer event, but they can still be engaged with your program and with your company, and really kind of, you know, add to that, to the spirit of volunteerism at your company is really important. So myth number 3, people who volunteer online don't volunteer on site, face-to-face.
Yes, indeed, another myth. All of the research shows that most people that volunteer online also volunteer on site, usually at the same organization. That said, there are a lot of people who volunteer with an organization around the world. Kaye used the example of expats, and that's a great one, where you can volunteer to support an organization back in your home country. So don't think that in promoting virtual volunteering you're telling people to stop volunteering on site if that's what they're doing, or that this is a replacement. Most people look at it as just another great way to give back to causes they care about.
Yeah, and Kaye, I wonder, have you seen this also at Newell Rubbermaid with you know, your employees who are engaging in virtual volunteering also still, you know, when they can?
Absolutely. We've seen where it actually has benefited the organization because the employee now has alternate ways of getting involved. So for example, on site they may be doing hands-on work, whether it be painting or building or some sort of beautification, but the off-site virtual piece allows them to use some of their skills or talents to help the organization. So for example, they may be creating marketing materials. They may be able to manage their social media. There's an opportunity to review, if you're working with a school and the school has an essay contest, you can review those essays from the comfort of your home. So we have seen where it has allowed the employee to give at a greater impact to the organization.
Great. It's good to hear that it does hold true in the corporate setting as well, that you've seen it. So moving right along on to myth number 4, and we talked a little bit about this earlier when we were kind of looking at the you know, small list of different virtual volunteering opportunities that you know, online volunteers engaged primarily in technology-related tasks might not necessarily hold true. So Jayne, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
You've already seen the list that I provided of online tasks, and you've heard from Kaye about online tasks, and you certainly heard that the tasks mostly aren't tech-related. An executive reviewing CVs that have been submitted for a position at a nonprofit, or translating a document, or mentoring a young person. The technology just has to do with how you are getting connected with the organization. But most online volunteering assignments aren't tech related, although many are. And if you look at VolunteerMatch, which has a very large database of virtual volunteering tasks, you'll note that many aren't tech related. And what's important to remember is that most nonprofits and even schools won't say we need online volunteers. Instead, what they're going to say is we need someone to research this topic, or we need someone to review these resumes for this position who's an expert in whatever, or we need someone to help us create a social media policy. Those can all be virtual volunteering assignments, but the organization might not brand them that way. So I tend to tell people to look for assignments that they know they have the expertise in, and then when they approach the organization say, you know, I'll be doing this entirely or partly online. It's very easy to find these assignments. They're just not necessarily branded as virtual volunteering.
Great, yeah, and I actually just did a search on our site this morning to see what some of those, you know, first ones that popped up were, and just like you were saying, kind of on that first page, I mean, there were things like fundraising, mentoring small business owners, people who they needed videographers that they could do it from anywhere, help writing newsletters. So, you know, again, and that was just on the first page of results. So there are definitely a lot to choose from that aren't tech related. And so, Kaye, what are some of the things that people are doing at Newell Rubbermaid for virtual volunteering?
There is a plethora, and some of the things surprise me when I see them. We have had employees who have done envelope stuffing for organizations. The organization sends them the materials, and they stay at home, and they can do envelope stuffing. We've had other organizations have some of our volunteers knit. For example, if they need scarves or blankets for a particular group of people, we've had them knitting. So as we talk about it not always being technology-based, these are some other options there are as well. One of my personal favorites is online shopping for seniors. There is a senior center home who makes it easy for the volunteer to shop on behalf of a senior and have the shopping delivered directly to the home. We have translation services, certainly, but there are schools who have a parent base whose English may not be their first language. So we've had employees translate letters that go home and flyers and do some event planning as well for that particular organization or that particular school. So there is certainly a wide variety of types of volunteering that can happen from this perspective.
Great, thanks. So again, trucking right along into myth number 5. Companies that allow employees to volunteer online from work end up with lost productivity.
So I'm sure that is a fear that many companies have. It's the one that I heard back in '97 when I first started researching and promoting virtual volunteering. And I have to say I cannot find any stats whatsoever that back up this myth. In fact, most companies that I talk to have problems getting their employees to take the paid time off that the employees are allowed to volunteer. So I think this is I still haven't seen any, I hear the fear expressed, but I don't see the fear as a reality. And I have to say it really warms my heart as I sit here almost 20 years later and hear a company, you know, talking about how they're promoting virtual volunteering when it doesn't feel like it was that long ago. I heard companies saying this myth, oh, we can't do this, we'll lose productivity. I just can't find any evidence of it at all. Kaye?
So far, so good for us. We do have a policy that does allow for time off, though I would agree we don't have, it hasn't been raised, if it is an issue, that there is any loss in productivity at all for it. I think if there are any employees who are engaging from work, it is usually during a break time or some sort of designated time, but I haven't found where it has interrupted their productivity at all.
Right, and I think, one of the things that when we were chatting yesterday, while your employees might not be engaging in the virtual volunteering, opportunities from work, if they are getting engaged and doing virtual volunteering outside of work hours, all of the research that's out there does show that, more engaged employees are happier, healthier, and more productive employees. So, if you're offering, like we were talking about yesterday, if you're continuing to offer all of these multiple ways for your employees who might not be able to get engaged, then really, at the end of the day, I would think, based on the research about engagement, that you would actually end up with a more productive workforce because you're offering more of those opportunities for people to become engaged and become connected to the work that they're doing and the work that their company is doing. So it'd be interesting. Maybe there's a research project in there for us. So to just kind of move into some wrap-up on the myths section here. So Kaye, tell us a little bit about what some of the triumphs and challenges have been with virtual volunteering at Rubbermaid.
Well, first and foremost, we have seen it is improved employee engagement and morale, because prior to being able to offer virtual volunteering, again, we had a challenge with engaging those workers who traditionally would not be able to physically leave their workstation to go out and volunteer. So this enhancement and this option has allowed us to be able to involve a greater portion of our workforce. It also gives an opportunity for our employees to either fine-tune a personal skill that they have, or be able to meet the needs of their personal passions. So for example, if you're an accountant all day during your 9 to 5 here at Newell Rubbermaid, and you have an opportunity to work with an organization, you get to fine-tune those accounting skills. However, if you're an accountant that has a creative spark to you, and you have an interest in graphic design, it also gives that person an opportunity to utilize those skills as well. One of the greatest triumphs so far is that there's no real cost associated with the virtual volunteering, no real cost to the business, that is. So there are no T-shirts that have to be bought. There is no budget that needs to be set aside, no tools. It really is up to the employee. Certainly any volunteering that they do during company time is already absorbed into whatever would have been paid for the technology that they're using to carry it through. So there is no additional overhead and no additional cost, which is wonderful when we're in times of very lean budgets. Again, we are very much in the infancy stage. We've been involved in virtual volunteering for less than a year, but we have found that there are some challenges. One of the greatest challenges, I guess, is that it's hard to measure impact when you have employees who are volunteering virtually with a variety of organizations at a variety of time. So unless those employees turn around and, one, log their hours, or two, give us some sort of connection or report to the organization, it is hard for us to measure impact. The other issue is there's limited or no interaction with beneficiaries. Virtual volunteering doesn't work for employees who need to be very hands-on. In addition, there is no real oversight of the projects. So it's hard if you are a company whose volunteering is definitely in line with your corporate focus areas. It would be hard to give oversight and to ensure that the volunteering is still on strategy. And then there are limited options in limited options in the types of projects offered. So while we did say there were a variety of options, there are, but I think once you've been doing this after a certain time, if you only have a certain skill set, it may become limiting to you as well.
Great, thanks, Kaye. Jayne, I wonder if you might be able to comment on some of those challenges that Kaye just mentioned. I know that we're going to talk about some ideas on measuring virtual volunteering, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit about measuring impact, the kind of lack of company oversight, and the limited interaction with beneficiaries.
Well, for the lack of, for being able to measure, certainly the rest of the presentation is going to talk a lot about that and how you can know what your volunteers, what your employees are doing as online volunteers. As far as finding types of projects offered, VolunteerMatch is, of course, the first place you should always look, but there's really many organizations that are now promoting only online volunteering opportunities. One of them is, for instance, the United Nations, which has onlinevolunteering.org, and it's almost a mindset of trying to think about opportunities not as virtual but as what can I do. And I'm glad Kaye said the thing about being limited by your abilities, because that's certainly true. Whereas on-site opportunities, you might create opportunities more to involve people regardless of their skills. For instance, Habitat for Humanity doesn't just look for carpenters to help build houses. There's not a lot of organizations that are creating opportunities for online volunteers that don't require some sort of skill. So it can be a challenge for some employees to find that opportunity online that they can actually do. I'm not a graphic designer, for instance, so I can't do graphic design. So that's absolutely true. But there are a lot of options for addressing the challenges of knowing what your volunteers are doing, what your employees are doing as online volunteers, and the impact that they're having. And actually that will be the rest of the presentation. So if we want to go ahead and move to that. This is very text heavy, but I know that when I try to do a graphic, many people go, could you transcribe what you said, because I want to apply these principles. Just remember that employees like to see they're being celebrated and recognized. So the more you are recognizing an employee who's doing volunteering online or offline, the more likely they are to report their hours. It's a good idea to create a space or a section on the employee intranet just for discussing volunteering, however employees want to define that, virtual or otherwise. It could be a place where people share photos of themselves volunteering or testimonials. It's definitely a place where senior staff needs to come in and say, wow, this is great, thank you so much. Because the more you do that, the more your employees are very likely to keep reporting what they're doing informally at the very least. Really encourage picture sharing of volunteers in action, people taking selfies at their desk, for instance. Hey, look, I'm volunteering virtually. And again, this can be shared on an intranet or in your employee newsletter or whatnot. And this really gets people, oh, I'm doing that too. I'm going to take my selfie. It encourages people to share the more they see other employees sharing. And so the next slide will go through the rest of the recommendations. You're going to need regular reminders in your employee newsletter and company-wide communications about where to find online volunteering, what people are doing, etc. You're not going to be able to just do it once in the newsletter and think, okay, great, everybody got that message. You're going to have to repeat it and really create almost a brand around it. And even reminders at company-wide meetings. Show photos of employees volunteering. Be sure to thank people, talk about upcoming events. It can be really short. You don't have to do a big production about it, but it is nice to include it in company-wide meetings. And you can recognize departments that have reported the most people volunteering or have reported some particularly interesting online volunteering activities. Don't just reward most hours, create, most innovative volunteering or most courageous volunteering, or create some interesting things around that will encourage other employees and departments to report, because they're seeing people being rewarded for talking about their volunteering. And it's absolute, you need a very simple volunteer reporting form. The simple the better, that encourages employees to share their volunteering information. Absolutely have it online, maybe paper versions as well. There's still people that just really prefer paper. And you can drop them by department meetings, hand them out, encourage employees to fill them out, and reward employees that do fill them out, and celebrate employees that fill them out and talk about what they've done. And so those are some recommendations I had, and they were actually based on talking with Kaye about some of the challenges before this webinar. So those are some of my recommendations.
Great, thanks. I had a quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but a quick question for Kaye, kind of based on some of the recommendations you were talking about with, you know, how to promote and to get people excited about virtual volunteering in your company. I wonder, Kaye, what methods has Rubbermaid been using when you first started kind of promoting virtual volunteering as an option?
We actually spoke directly to who we wanted to target, which were those employees who traditionally have challenges volunteering. So actually, reading over Jayne's points, a lot of the methods that she has pointed is what we did. We did include it on our internal website. We do encourage our HR leaders, our senior leaders, to talk about it in meetings. We have posters that we've included in some of our factory facilities that talk about it as well. And anytime we have an opportunity whenever we have the opportunity to promote volunteerism at all, we make sure we do a special mention to virtual volunteering because it is so new.
Great, thanks. So Jayne, tell us a little bit more about what we should do now to get started.
Yes. So you're all ready. You've got a great foundation to get started if you're not already. You could write an article about virtual volunteering in your company newsletter, and I will tell you, don't be surprised if some employees come back and go, oh, I'm already doing this, because that is very possible. Introduce some of the ideas that we've offered here about tracking time and accomplishments, and maybe have a panel discussion over lunchtime about people you've discovered at your company that are engaging in virtual volunteering. Invite employees to come and ask them questions about their experience, and then at the end you can do a big plug for how to find opportunities, what your company's policy is around volunteering. And I'll just say again, just don't ultimately segregate online volunteers from your on-site volunteers in your overall data. As far as, you might want to have some data that's unique to online volunteering, but remember that everybody considers themselves volunteers. They're probably not thinking, now I'm an online volunteer and now I'm an on-site volunteer. They see themselves as volunteers and helping, and they tend not to parcel it out. So be careful, because it can make it seem like on-site volunteering is somehow more valuable than online volunteering, and that's the last thing you want to do. But those are some things you could do right now to get started. And of course, I'm going to plug my book again and also tell you that there is an associated wiki, and it's free. And the address is there, and you'll be able to download this presentation, and the address will be there as well. And that's a space where we have links to tools about screening volunteers, about communicating with volunteers, etc. And we also have an online discussion on LinkedIn, and it's free, and you can jump right in and ask more questions and share stories. And I'll certainly be sharing information about this webinar, because it's so exciting to talk to the corporate world about what they're doing with virtual volunteering. So there's some things you can do to further your learning and expand virtual volunteering at your company.
Great, thank you so much, Jayne. So let's hop into a little bit of Q&A. So just so everybody remembers, you can still keep submitting your questions as we're going through the Q&A. We will keep our eyes peeled to see what other questions are coming in. So if you have anything that's coming up right now, feel free to send it over. So the first, we had a few questions that came in kind of about ways to, or opportunities to engage different types of employees with different types of access, right? So one of the questions was, I mean, are there any types of virtual volunteering opportunities out there that really can accommodate groups of employees virtually? Have either of you ever seen opportunities like that?
Yes.
There are opportunities that I've seen where multiple employees can agree to work with a particular organization in two ways. They can all agree to work with one organization doing different tasks that the organization may have available virtually, or they can, for example, I gave the example before of being judges in an essay contest. 3 or 4 or how many ever of the volunteer spots that are available, employees could choose to go ahead and volunteer together on one project. It all depends on what's available from the organization.
Great.
Yeah, that's a great example, judging an online contest. You've also got, if you've got a group of employees that are web designers, they can together design a website for an organization. You can also have groups of volunteers, for instance, go into Wikipedia for a museum, for instance, and make sure that certain information is correct and links to where it should. I once had a small group of volunteers, though they weren't from one company, they were a group of online volunteers, and they managed a 24-hour online event. And so they each overlapped their time and would read messages, get spam off the list, whatnot. So that was a real-time event where they couldn't do it just whenever they had time. They actually had a slot to do. But yes, there are groups of assignments, assignments for groups of online volunteers, and those are some examples.
Great. Yeah, and so it's kind of nice because it sounds like, you know, one of the things that people might, another maybe myth, right, about virtual volunteering is that it's kind of an ad hoc individual solo adventure, but really it can also be used in, you know, in the same way that an on-site hands-on volunteer event might be used to help build morale or team building or anything like that, and virtual volunteering can also be used in that way as well. That's great.
Oh, exactly, exactly.
So then the next one was, what about for employees? Because, you know, we talked about how a lot of virtual volunteering tasks, while they might not be tech related, a lot of them are online. So what about employees who maybe have limited access to computers? What are some ways either you've kind of worked around that, or different types of opportunities maybe that you've heard about where you wouldn't necessarily need to have easy access to a computer?
Well, the whole definition of virtual volunteering is that you're using a computer. So, you know, all volunteering has limits. I can't volunteer, for instance, for some of the outdoor things at Oregon State Parks because I have very bad knees, so that's my limit. A lot of online volunteering is limited more by literacy skills than computer skills or lack of computer access. So it's something that's not for everyone. That said, there are remote opportunities, as Kaye was talking about, the knitting from home, baking, dog treats for the local dog shelter is one I've seen. There's lots of remote opportunities that don't have to do with computers. I wouldn't necessarily call them virtual volunteering, but they're most definitely volunteering. And there's something that employees can do from home. In fact, I'll note that one of the most prominent Knit from Home to Help Others programs, which is called Afghans for Afghans, was started by 3 online volunteers I worked with back at the UN. And they started that organization where people knit. And it's not just to give Afghans things that Americans make. It's actually to create some intercultural exchanges between Americans and Afghans. So the borders are very fluid on this topic. But those are some things that people who maybe want to do remote volunteering but don't have computer access, those are some things that they can do. I'm sure Kaye might want to jump in.
I think you pretty much covered it, actually. I was going to emphasize the fact that, yes, you do have the envelope stuffing. You do have fundraiser calls and thank you calls. So there are certainly options, but I think you covered all of them, Jayne.
Yay!
So the next question is for Kaye. So you did mention on your triumphs and challenges slide that you did see an improvement in employee engagement and morale. And one of the questions that we had come in was if you saw an actual increase in the total number of people that were volunteering when you began to promote virtual, or was it the same employees who had already been volunteering but then just started engaging in virtual volunteering opportunities as well?
We definitely saw new employees volunteering. Again, when we rolled it out specifically to target audiences. So there were some locations where they almost felt helpless, as if they could not volunteer, and we paid special attention to them. So then we noticed that there was activity coming directly from those locations, and we saw a significant jump in volunteerism in particular areas. It's a little easier for us to monitor because we're in specific locations, specific cities, and our manufacturing plants are in specific areas and specific cities, so we don't have to sort through the volunteers. It's very clear that if they are located in East Longmeadow, Massachusetts, we know which employees those are, and we're able to gauge it from that perspective. So yes, it was very clear that it opened the door for employees who had never volunteered before.
That's great. So you did definitely see that this strategy be successful with getting new people engaged. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
So Jayne, I have a question that came up for you as well. So do you find, or in any of your research and the experience that you have working with, also with nonprofits, with virtual volunteering, is there anything that shows that the show-up rate for a virtual volunteering opportunity is any different than it would be for an in-person opportunity? Like, do they see a lower follow-through, I guess, rate because the person doesn't actually have to physically be there?
No, not really. Most organizations will tell you that they have a 50% no-show rate on people that apply to volunteer on-site. The better an organization's screening, the better their process, the more likely they will screen in the people who are really going to do the assignment and screen out the people who really aren't. I get people that say, how, do I ever worry about online volunteers, signing up for things that they're not qualified to do or whatnot. And, what I tell people is I can really tell pretty quickly if an online volunteer is going to work out or not, because they either do it or they don't, and they can't fake it. Whereas an on-site volunteer can fake it for a while. They can come in and smile and bring me coffee and sit at their desk, and I think, wow, they're amazing. And then I realize after about a week, oops, they actually haven't done anything. Online volunteering, it's much harder to fake it because we're only talking about the quality of work and what they're doing. So it really, the dropout rate really has to do with how well the organization screens volunteers before they place them in the assignments. I know that the more I screen volunteers, the better the rate is of their placement. The more I say, oh, just come and do it if you can, the bigger the no-show rate.
Great, thanks. So as we're getting close to the end of the hour here, why don't we go ahead and launch our second poll and just see how people are feeling about virtual volunteering now after hearing from Jayne and Kaye and learning all this great information. So went ahead and launched it. So, the question is, do you agree with this statement? I feel inspired and excited to start promoting virtual volunteering to my employees. Let's see if we've slipped any of the not sures and skepticals. All right, give you guys a few more seconds to vote. All right, looks like we did. So Nobody is saying that they're definitely still skeptical, so that's great. And the majority of you are excited to get started. So that's wonderful. We were successful.
This makes me so happy.
So to kind of close us up here, I wanted to ask both Jayne and Kaye to share with us their final thoughts. So what's the one thing that you want someone listening to walk away knowing and understanding? Jayne, do you want to get started?
Sure. The thing that I hope you'll all walk away with is that virtual volunteering is real volunteering, and it has a real impact, and it's tried and true, not something to be scared of, and is a great opportunity for, to further engage your employees in the causes that they support and care about.
Great. And Kaye?
I'll take the tail end of what Jayne said. For those people who are working in the capacity similar to mine, it is a part of our job to make sure that we engage as many employees as possible. I think we have to stay on whatever is innovative. This is new, this is innovative, and it gives an opportunity for us to cast a wider net and to get more employees engaged in ways that they may never have conceived. So for those who are excited, I'm excited for you, and I hope you receive the overwhelming benefit of employee engagement and morale boost that it'll bring.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kaye, and thank you so much to Jayne for joining us this morning. It's been a really enlightening session and something that we haven't really been talking about, so it's great to kind of get it out there in the open. So just to wrap things up this morning, just a reminder to everybody on the call that in addition to our webinar series, there are also other ways that you can stay up to date and informed on what's going on in the world of employee volunteering, engagement, and CSR. You can follow our blog at volunteeringiscsr.org. Follow us on Twitter at VM_solutions, and sign up for our good, monthly Good Companies newsletter, which you can sign up for on our blog and on our website. And last but not least, reminder for next, it's not May 28th, that's today, for our next webinar. It's coming up on Thursday, June 26th, 2014, same time, same place. So this time we're going to be having some folks from NV Energy, Apollo Education Group, and Alina Health on the call to talk about unique and innovative strategies that they've all used to increase engagement in their volunteering programs. So we hope that you will join us for that. And thank you again to Jayne and Kaye for joining us, and thank you to everybody on the call for your insightful questions. And we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.